Hello, lacrosse friends, and welcome once again to Inside the World of Box Lacrosse, a very special, kind of like an after-school special kind of episode today, as we've got an internet shutdown in upstate New York, while specifically where Greg and Charity live, so they do not have any internet, so we are recording in a whole different way, and Adam and I don't really know how this is going to turn out, but we're recording our part, and Greg and Charity assure us they will make magic on the other end. So, yeah, here we go. We're going to look at how we did last week in terms, or not how we did. We'll look at that in the predictions, even though it's up there and you'll be able to see it. And it was good. We were both above 500, which is kind of new for me, I think, lately. But Adam, what game do you want to jump into first? I would think we're going to the West Coast, right, to start in Vancouver?
I would love to do that. Yeah, I mean the debut of Christian Del Bianco was unbelievable, and it was interesting because we did see in that first goal that he let up, it kind of trickled through, and there was maybe one or two people, I should say, maybe had some sort of maybe question about, is he going to be rusty? It's been almost a year since he's played in the National Lacrosse League. What's going to happen there? But after that first goal trickled in early in the first, he was locked in until the fourth quarter, which I'm sure, allowed a few of those goals he'd want to have back, but still was really the backbone and transformed that team in a huge, decisive win.
And the thing that's interesting, Christian Del Bianco's first start in the National Lacrosse League when he was just a pup, still 19, I think, at the time. And
Yeah.
he actually wound up starting the season opener because Frank Chiliano was suspended after a fight in Saskatchewan in the preseason. So Del Bianco went in and he was absolutely lit up. And I'll tell you, there may have been people at that point thinking, wow, you picked this 18-year-old in the second round of the draft, of a great draft in 2015. Was that a good idea? Well, obviously it was a good idea.
Yeah,
For
and
Calgary.
I'll always lean back on the fact, and I've said it on this show before. All you have to do is look back at Matt Vince's
Yeah,
first 3 years in the league and
yeah.
be like, okay, sometimes it takes some time to settle in.
So Vancouver, a big win, and that reinforces. I did a story last week on my musings about teams from that were not in playoff positions who had the best chance to move up. And Vancouver, even though they were in 11th, I had as the top one based on strength of schedule, how everything's looking for them, and they certainly are reinforcing that. This week, we can go to the teams in playoff positions who are most likely to drop out of those positions. And it was a fairly clear one, again, based on strength of schedule, current record, who they're playing, and how it goes. We're going to jump to a game where Calgary had won 11-6. Or sorry, I had won the week before a 17-11 win over Buffalo.
Yep.
The Bandits just score 11 goals again, but this time Vince and the D keep Calgary to 6. Calgary sitting in 8th place, and they have a tough schedule, and they are the team most likely to drop out of playoff position. You can go see that on IL Indoor in this week's musings.
Yeah, your musings are always great to read. It's great to kind of hear your thoughts or see your thoughts, I should say. But yeah, it was interesting, and not to I guess to plug the Lacrosse Matrix podcast for a brief second. I did have Kyle Buchanan of the Buffalo Bandits on as one of the guests this week. I have two episodes. Connor Robinson of the Colorado Mammoth was the other one. But when I was talking to Kyle Buchanan of the Bandits, he said that you could hear a pin drop in the locker room in Bandit Land when they lost 17-11, that was not what they expected. The score line, as we all saw that game, it kind of isn't indicative to as close as it was in the fourth. There was a couple of late goals for Calgary that they kind of, added to that tally, but still a very disappointing performance. And they were determined to make a change, and they did that. And one of the interesting nuggets, just quickly, about the difference of those two games, you had Buffalo allowing 17 goals at home, which was the first time they had done that in a regular season game in 7 years. And then the next week, Calgary only scoring 6 goals at home, which tied a franchise low going all the way back to 2002. So to have those so juxtaposed situations on home floor is pretty wild.
That's why people tune in. It's for the Levy Nuggets, among other things, I'm sure. But I think the Levy Nuggets are critical because that's a beautiful, beautiful synopsis right there of the week that was for those two teams, rebounding off the game the week before. I want to talk a bit about Georgia at Albany, which is a game I had the good fortune to be down in Albany doing color commentary beside Dan Ball on the play-by-play. What a game! It was very, very exciting. Went right down to the wire. Albany led most of the way, and then Lyle Thompson, with a couple of goals late in the game, tied it up. It really looked like Georgia had momentum. Albany had lost a bunch of games this year in that fashion, having a lead and then falling behind. But having guys like Will Johansson, who has played all season now, I wouldn't think of him as a rookie really anymore, except when it comes to Rookie of the Year talk. And Colton Watkinson back in, had a phenomenal game.
Yeah.
And then they get the power play, and Dyson Williams scores
Yeah.
the game winner with about a minute to go. And that was huge. That was huge for Albany. It keeps them actually in the playoff race marginally, right? They've got 9 losses. They're not in good position. But the thing that really jumped out at me, I've been a big Will Johansson fan. Seeing him live in person, he's even better than you think. He is an absolute beast.
Oh, he's amazing to see in person. I've been up there a few times
Yeah.
this year, and I'm going up again this weekend for the game against the Bandits. Excited for that.
Nice.
But yeah, he has been phenomenal. But also, you mentioned Colton Watkinson in the lineup. You know, since when he plays, there is a difference of that club. There's a difference in that defense, and we also have to remember that they're still out without John Wagner and Jackson Ishimura, who are key absences on that back end. But yeah, it's a team that's been transformed, and Kyle Jackson has been a very welcomed addition, both as a veteran and as a contributor. But also, I just want to give a shout out to Dyson because this is the first time that one of his clutch fourth quarter goals has actually kind of meant something. He's had a couple earlier in the season. The first one earlier in his rookie season against Calgary when Dane Doby had that tremendous fourth quarter. He scored a late goal that I believe tied the game. Unfortunately, Dane had other plans in overtime. But yeah, it was very interesting to see Dyson kind of have that moment. And I think that picture of him looking at the crowd, his arms spread wide and saying, I can do this, I'm here, is one that we'll look back for a long time.
That was pretty awesome. Moving on from there, we have another close game, really the only other close game of the weekend, which was
Nope, Stamper.
Colorado Philadelphia. And what a game that was. We both had the Wings thinking they've got to turn it around at some point, especially with Colorado without Zed Williams, without Eli McLaughlin, really facing some challenges. But boy, the Mammoth can face challenges.
Yeah, I mean that was very impressive, and again, going back to this week's episode of the Lacrosse Matrix podcast, Connor Robinson, what they've been able to do defensively, holding teams to 8 goals in back-to-back weeks. I mean, when you're missing Eli McLaughlin, when you're missing Zed Williams, you're going to have some struggles offensively. But knowing that you have Dylan Ward, knowing that you have Robert Hope and the rest of that defense there, it's been huge that they can have those defensive performances. But what else can you expect from Pat Coyle and Dan McCray bench there? Really, two strong defensive minds. And if Colorado can beat you defensively and they can beat you offensively, I mean that's a team that you don't want to face them postseason time. And it looks like we could even be seeing Colorado hosting a playoff game in the Loud House the way that they're playing right now.
Well, as of right now, right
Yeah.
in the top 4, so that's what it would take. And in Halifax, we had a game. This is one that we both got wrong. We thought Saskatchewan would roll over in Halifax, not roll over them, but keep rolling. But
Yeah.
Halifax showed that they are really on fire. That this was a strange game because, I mean, Halifax is very good. They're not as dominant, I don't think, as they looked against Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan,
Yeah.
definitely not as bad as they looked in this game. The big thing I think for Sask, there are nights when you're just not on as a goalie. Frank Chiliano was not on. Thomas Kaiser came in; he was no better, and they just weren't stopping shots. And
Yeah.
you're not going to win when you're not stopping shots.
No, and it was a fluke of a game, and we were just talking about the Buffalo and Calgary week to
Yeah.
week that can be definitely a little bit strange. We've also seen it even with Halifax, which consistency has been one of their biggest issues, not just this season, but over the last few years. Obviously,
Mhm.
been on a good stretch since February, but to have those kind of what are we going to see kind of weeks is not the way for long-term stability, but phenomenal performance from Halifax. And I believe Stephen Keogh said a couple weeks ago that you don't want to see Halifax somehow get a home playoff game, because if you do, he said that they can uh, roll a stretch together where they can win the NLL Cup. So this team, if they're playing like that, yes, Saskatchewan wasn't at their best, but when Halifax is at their best, they are dangerous.
Yeah, again, if Halifax plays like that, they beat anybody in the league. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter who they're up against if they're shooting that well. But
Yep.
you just don't perform that way every week where everyone's clicking. So
Right.
again, the consistency will be the key. But boy, they're scary when you watch
Yeah.
them just running it up like that. That's
I mean,
pretty
Clark
scary.
Peterson
Oh,
has been great, but also give shout out to another rookie and Mike Robinson. That
hmm
was his best game of the year so far. 7 points, 7 loose ball recoveries, a
yeah,
hat trick, 4 assists. I mean, he has been, after his kind of slower four
hmm
game start to the season, he has been a very key contributor for this team.
yeah,
And he's not a rookie of the year finalist in my opinion, but if he had played if he keeps playing like this, the rest of the season and for the rest of his career, he's going to be a game changer for Halifax, no doubt.
yeah. And we have a couple more games. Rochester over Ottawa. Rochester is rolling, hottest club in the league, and they are actually. I mean, I don't know if people have really thought of them as a club that's a threat in the playoffs until the last few weeks. But the
Mhm.
way they're playing, I'll tell you, they are looking awfully good, and I wouldn't want to be having to face them in a one-game elimination series.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing that I had noted, I think it was either on this program or on X, that when you look at the schedules of the teams, and I know you've been doing this in your musings, who are people facing? Rochester's schedule has been favorable to them, but they've also been delivering. You could face a
Mhm.
team that is underperforming and underperform yourself. That
Yeah,
has not been the case with Rochester over the last 4 games. Connor Fields has been MVP like. It's been
yeah,
phenomenal. So, but Ryan Lanchberry as well has been next level. He's stepped it up. When last year we thought he was having a great year, this year is even better. So, I mean, that is a team that is clicking. Rylan Hartley is having some really good starts, which is exactly what they need. Yeah, they're a dangerous team right now.
yeah. And they believe. I believe they. I'm just trying to. It's in my my musings when I talk about the teams that could fall into the playoffs and why Rochester's probably not one of them. In those last 4 games, I believe they've outscored their opponents 68-38. 4 games or
Wow.
5 games. Like it's maybe it's 5 games, but yeah, they've just been dismantling teams and not bad teams, you know.
Right.
So
But I would say that we do need to kind of temper our
yeah,
expectations a little bit. Like this San Diego game coming up in a couple of weeks. They have a bye week this week, but in a couple of weeks is going to be key for Rochester,
hmm
because not bad teams at all. Ottawa, Vegas is not having a great year. Albany before their 2 game stretch was not at their best. So I would say definitely, and actually the Calgary game before Nick Rose. So, I would say that they've been really, really good. But, if they make, when they make the playoffs and when things are rolling and they're
yeah.
facing those top teams, are we going to see a dominant team like this? I don't think so.
No, no,
But it
not when you
will.
get up. If they're
Right,
6 to 8 and you're playing a top 3 team,
right.
that's going to be a big challenge. I mean, it is a different thing when you're facing a Buffalo, Saskatchewan, Colorado, Halifax, the top teams in playoff mode.
Yeah, but I
We'll see.
will say it is a huge confidence builder
hmm
to have this stretch going into the postseason. So if they can continue this, riding a huge high and maybe even a big win streak, that is exactly what you want sometimes going into the playoffs.
Well, it'd be a massive win streak if they get to the
Yeah,
playoffs without losing.
yeah.
It's hard to picture them winning 3 more in a row, and I
Mhm.
mean that's teams just don't win that many games in a row for the most part. But
No,
you never know. You never know.
yeah.
You did mention both the teams that were in the final game of the weekend. While you're talking about Rochester, there, Las Vegas was in San Diego. You called it a dismantling, I believe, and
Yes.
it was. And I mean,
Yeah.
20-11. Does it flatter Las Vegas a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it was watching that first quarter. I was watching it with Preston and Nikki in the living room, and I was just like, "Oh my God, what is happening right now?"
Yeah.
This was. It didn't feel close. Good on Las Vegas though to have some literal fight and to
Yeah.
try and get under the skin of San Diego and show that they weren't going to go out without a fight. But San Diego just ran all over the Desert Dogs.
I mean, that's part of Las Vegas's MO. They've been from the start a team that'll be chippy. Will be. I think other
Yeah.
teams consider them dirty.
Mm,
So I think that's part of who they are. They want to be tough to play against, and
yeah.
which is great. But you got to do more than just be gritty,
Yeah,
right?
and I mean defensively and in goal, and you got to feel for Justin Getty and Landon Kells.
Yeah.
It is tough to be the center of attention in between the pipes and have that happen to you and have that happen to you not only in back-to-back weeks but now three times this season.
Yeah.
And another Levy nugget for you: this is the first time since 2018, Stamper, that a team has allowed 20 or more goals in three or more games. So it hasn't happened in a while, and we're seeing a rough stretch. I'll put it that way defensively for Las Vegas.
Not the kind of nugget you want to be dropping on your team.
No, not
Who
at
was the
all.
team in 2018 that gave up 320s?
There was the Vancouver Stealth. And then also the New England Black Wolves.
Oh,
I think the
intriguing.
Black Wolves did it four times, and
Wow.
and Vancouver three. I could be switching those two teams around, but
Okay.
those were the two teams.
So moving forward, if you're Las Vegas,
Mhm.
obviously things. I mean, you were pointing out they have to win, or maybe I was pointing out. Maybe we both pointed out that they've got to win two more games down the stretch just to avoid having their worst season yet.
Yeah.
Which is not where you want to be in season three. The
Yeah.
signing of Sheldon Burns this week caught me by surprise. I know it caught you by
Yeah.
surprise.
Hmm.
I look at it and I say Sheldon Burns was fantastic in 2018.
Yeah.
He's been a solid player since then a bit, but hasn't really played for a couple of years. I don't know. Like I've been a big Shelly Burns fan, but I
Hmm.
feel like at this point, as a young team, and if you're looking for some leadership, I guess that's one thing. But I look around and I say Liam Osborne
Hmm.
playing for the Whitby Steelhawks and has been a forward, but just transformed in transitioned in the Arena League to a D tranny player, and he's told me he just wants to be a leader, help young guys get into the game, understand the game, learn how to handle themselves and stuff. He may be the best player in the Arena Lacrosse League East this year. He's been dynamic. I would be signing him in a heartbeat if I needed a defensive player.
Yeah.
He's still a youngish player, and has been through the grinder. He's got leadership. There's a bunch of guys that I can think that would really offer you something a little bit, that you might really need in a young team like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And, I think when you're in season three and things just really aren't going that way, you've got some new pieces there. Jonathan Donville. You've got a growing and impressive young Connor Curse there. I think that, maybe try and find a younger guy. I understand, wanting a leader, wanting someone who could help, that's a great strategy. But, if what you're doing isn't working, and this has kind of been the MO over the last few years, I think you kind of want to start young and try and build almost as if you're trying to replicate a new franchise, and you're doing an expansion draft.
Mm-hmm. That's going to do it for the first section. The recap of last week, quite an interesting week, and of course we're moving forward. We're going to come back and talk about the awards recap, or the awards segment. Who is the MVP in the league right now? Spoiler alert, I'm not sure we're going to have a solid answer for you, but we'll come back with that. And of course, we have our predictions in the Humiliate the Host section coming up as well. We'll take a quick break here on Inside the World of Box Lacrosse. I'm Steven Stamp with Adam Levy, and somewhere in the background, Greg and Charity Beecher will be doing their thing, even though they're not with us right at the moment.
Welcome back, everyone, to Inside the World of Box Lacrosse, or ITWOBL as we call it. I'm Adam Levy, Steven Stamp with me, and Greg Beecher in the background somewhere in this abyss that we are now creating in this very unique recording of ITWOBL. And here we are in this section to talk about some award winners and some award, or I should say, award contested our contests that we have coming up. It's a really competitive race for a bunch of different awards here, Stamper, and I know we were talking about the MVP. So, I guess one of the interesting things for me is that you've got a guy like Connor Fields on a team that's red hot for the Rochester Nighthawks, just playing so well. He's got back-to-back 5-goal games now. He's got back-to-back 10-plus point games. And he's on pace, Stamper, if you can believe it or not, because last season was also great for him. But he's on pace for 125 plus points and 150 plus loose balls. He would be the first player in NLL history to achieve both of those marks. That would just be incredible to see. And if Rochester finishes the regular season out strong, he's really making a case for himself.
Yeah, and I mean, it's amazing. He's 7th in the league in loose balls. The guys ahead of him include Jake Withers, Joe Nardella, Justin Inacio, are 3 face-off guys, and then Zach Courier, who's just kind of inhuman, and
Yeah.
and Robert Hope and Mitch Desnew. So remarkable. Now he has played 15 games. The Nighthawks have played more games than anybody else. So
Yep.
that's a factor. But still, those are remarkable numbers he's putting up, and he's really taken on a role. It's funny because people talked a lot last year about how good he was, and he was really good. But even earlier this season, when he wasn't scoring at his now 6.9 points per game clip, I thought he was a better player for the team because he was really, you could see that he was really trying to involve everyone, not get so much into the I have to go and do this mode, which is easy to get into. And he really got into it, and it worked, and he kept with it. And it is a rare Nighthawks game where Fields isn't just meshing with everybody. And Lansbury being so good has helped
Yeah.
as well. You've got Ryan Smith, you've got other guys on that offense that are helping. But I mean, Fields, boy, you could make a really strong argument for him as the MVP at this point in the season.
But it is interesting, and this is always where it gets so complicated with these awards. And I know that we're both voters for the NLL's awards, and so are we in a
Are you
situation now
still?
where? Well, hopefully,
Yeah.
goodness me, I
Sorry.
would surely hope so.
Uh,
But yeah, I would say that when you look at the situation in Rochester, it's really you've got Lanchbury, you've got Ryan Smith. It's kind of a three-headed monster there. Is that a situation where it's like a Josh Byrne, Dean Smith thing, where you're like, well, who do I really give my vote to? Does it kind of take away from what Connor Fields is doing? I don't know. I always feel like that's an argument we continuously
I
bring
know.
up.
It's so hard. And
Yeah.
I mean, you throw in Rylan Hartley, who
Yep.
I'm a big Hutchcraft fan, right? I think Riley Hutchcraft
Hmm.
has been really good for them, but Hartley has stepped up their goaltending to another level in his last handful of games.
Yeah.
And Matt Gilray, who I don't know if he'll get any votes for Transition Player of the Year because people seem to not notice. I think he's in that conversation as
Yeah.
well. So there's a lot of people driving that engine but I think the big numbers and the narrative awards tend to be narrative driven, right? Connor Fields, first
Hmm.
American-born player to get 3 straight 100-point seasons,
Yeah.
can be huge. Can really make people sit up and pay attention, and can be a little tiebreaker, kind of pushing you over if it's
Yeah.
close. If you were thinking about voting, say, for Dane Smith, who again is leading
Hmm.
the league at 7.6 points per game. He's got 69 assists already. They've only played 12 games.
Yeah.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, he's doing things that make you almost just forget about what people should actually be able to do.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, he's so incredibly impressive, but also an interesting kind of, I think mental thing that could come in here is voter exhaustion. You
Yes.
know, And you look at the guys like Byrne and Smith, they've been in the conversation for so long. How many people are just like, well, I think we should give it to somebody else.
Yeah, but I mean, Dane Smith didn't win it last year, right? Josh Byrne did, and I think
Right.
last year was a very wide open MVP vote as well. When you look at
Hmm.
Byrne, Smith, Nick Rose, Connor Fields had to be in that conversation. There was who was the fifth player last year that was right in the thick of that. Um, I feel like
That is,
there was somebody else,
yeah,
um, and I think you had to. I think Westberg was right in the mix last year as
yeah,
well.
yeah. He definitely was.
So it's tough. Like, how do you break it down amongst all those players? Because again, Fields and Lansbury, yes. Mitch Jones, Joe Terrence, probably a little less so with Philly kind of
Hmm.
spiraling down a bit, but still, I mean,
Yeah,
fantastic seasons. Smith and Byrne. I think Curtis Dixon has been incredible for Calgary,
yeah.
really kind of driving that train. And
Hmm.
do you consider him because none of us thought Calgary was going to be where they are.
Right. Everyone outside of the Calgary Roughnecks
Yeah,
thought that they weren't going to be very good. Yeah, and I would say that is a very good point. I think again it might come down to where they finish at the end of the regular season. So
yeah.
this final stretch, which their next two games, I do not envy their schedule facing San Diego and then at Saskatchewan, and also finishing the season versus Colorado.
Mm.
That is not an easy stretch for
It is not.
Calgary, and yeah, and I believe in your musings you have them on the outside looking in at the end of it, right?
Yeah, I mean they're the team that is the most likely,
Yeah.
based on strength of schedule and everything going into it, the most likely team to drop out. I mean, now they're eighth, so they on the surface you'd think they're the most likely team. The eighth
Hmm.
place team in an eight playoff team league, obviously, is consideration for that. But I mean, I pointed out in that Vancouver last week when I did the most likely to move up, they were the most likely, even though they were 11th and
Yeah.
not sitting at ninth or 10th. So, it depends on the schedule. Who you're playing is so much. And the way I did it, I look at how many playoff teams in current playoff position they're facing among their remaining games, and the strength of the ranking of their opponents. Which is, if you're playing Buffalo, they're first, you get one. If you are playing Calgary, they're eighth, you get eight. You add all those up, divide it by the number of games, and obviously the lower the number, the harder your schedule because you're playing
Hmm.
higher ranked teams. And yeah, Calgary's got a tough go. Now they've got Nick Rose, they've got Dixon, they've got things going on. They're not. They're certainly. It's not hopeless. I mean, they're in a
Yeah.
playoff spot, but it's going to be harder for them than anybody else, I think, to hang on to it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We were talking about Rochester and Connor Fields, and you look at Calgary. I mean, their schedules have been the exact opposite. Rochester having a very tough
Yes.
first half of the season, and then having a much easier schedule in the second half. Well, it's been, if you look back, starting on Valentine's Day, you've got. For Calgary, you got a game against Saskatchewan, Colorado, two games against Buffalo, then San Diego, Saskatchewan, and Colorado again in there. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a gauntlet.
Yeah. And it's funny because we do. I try not to fall into it, but we all do. Where you think, wow, this team's really hot, or boy, that team's
Yeah.
really struggling. It's like, well, they just played six in their last six games. They've played five of the top teams in the league. Like,
Yeah.
of course, it was more difficult, and
Yeah.
you play the teams that are down further down or that are not doing well at the moment, and you're going to do better. I mean, that's only human nature. I think you look at something like we talked about Rochester and how they're doing. The thing is, they are almost doubling their opponents in scoring, so it's not like they're just playing weaker teams and winning by a goal or two. But
Yeah.
and Philadelphia, we've talked about the issues they've been having again, playing some tough teams, but just not producing the way that they were. So
Hmm.
I want to move on to the Rookie of the Year
Yeah.
race, which all season, I mean, I've been kind of pushing for Will Johansson to be a part of this conversation all
Yeah.
season. Obviously, I think Brendan O'Neill, the way he started, kind of blew out to a bit of a lead. Probably Dyson
Hmm.
Williams has really come back, but I mean, I've thought that Johansson had to be right in that conversation. Watching him live and really getting a sense of everything he does, and really seeing a lot of him the last few weeks, I think he's the Rookie of the Year. I don't think there's even that much doubt about it, to be honest.
Hmm.
And I hope people recognize what he's doing, because I think, to me, one of the keys is how are you doing at your position? He's not the
Mm-hmm.
leading scorer, of course, he's a defender, but he is one of the leading transition scorers in the league. And
Mm-hmm.
I think he is having a better season as a defender than anybody is having at any other as a forward or certainly as a goalie in the league.
Yeah, I mean, it is going to be interesting because I know that, and now this has kind of been thrown out the window because we don't know the status of Adam Poitras
Right.
after that injury, whatever it was, looked very bad. I think one of us definitely should be giving a call to Coach and GM Williams to figure out what is going to be the future of Adam Poitras, at least for this season. But that's how I was looking at him. On the Desert Dogs, the record is not great, but his ability to be a contributor everywhere on the floor and do so really well. Again, when you talk about history, I mean, he is on pace. I believe that it was like for 35 points and 15 caused turnovers, and to be one of the first players in NLL history to do that, and to do that as a rookie. Unbelievable. So I think it is going to be very different. Maybe this is a year where people aren't just leaning a little bit more on the numbers and the achievements because all of those guys are also on teams that have not performed very well.
Hmm. And the one thing
Um,
I pointed out
yep.
was that, you know, you look at O'Neill and Williams, and they've been very good. Nothing against them,
Yep.
but they are not either of them on track to finish among the top 20 scoring seasons for a rookie.
Right.
Whereas Will Johansson is doing things that I don't think you could say 20 players have done as rookie defenders in this league. I mean, Owen Grant
Yep.
was up there for sure. Three times defensive players have won the award. Taylor Ray back in what 2004, 2002.
I think 2004 is right.
Yeah, Brody Merrill and Jake Withers. And with Jake Withers, it was interesting because it had been a long time since a defender had won it, but he had the face-offs to go with it, and that got the attention. There was the narrative. Again, I think he deserved the award. Like he was definitely good enough to win the
Yeah.
award based on his defense. But the face-offs are what pushed him over the top. So with Johansson, it would have to be something maybe to push him over the
Yeah.
top, or maybe it's just because the offensive guys aren't on any kind of record paces that it helps them.
Yeah, but now I'm gonna steal one of your thoughts that you just brought up, which
Sure.
is narrative driven stuff.
Yeah.
Which you look at Brendan O'Neill, this field dominant giant who has come in. We didn't know what to expect from him, and when you don't have necessarily an extensive box background and do what he's doing to
Hmm.
make some of the plays that I think also throws it in there. Brendan O'Neill has made some highlight reel plays where people are going to look back and remember, and they're going to be like, I remember when he did X, Y, and Z, and that was unbelievable.
Yeah.
What other rookie has done that?
The flying through
Um,
the hair one hand, flew through
yeah,
the air one hander. I mean, obviously, like people don't do that.
right. But also as an American,
Yeah.
he would be the first American since Tom Schreiber in 2017 to win Rookie of the Year, and with the presence and what it means for Brennan to be having a good box career this early in his career, I think could also change a lot of voters' minds.
That's a good point. I'm not buying it personally.
Yep.
I think O'Neill's had a great year
Yep.
as a rookie, but based on where he was coming from and where we all expected him to be, he's outperformed what
Yep.
I think most of us thought he would be able to do in his first year. Down the road, for sure, we knew he was going to become good, right? But
Yep.
I mean, he's he's been good. He's been spectacular in a lot of ways, but he's not producing at the level that players have done in the past. And I think
Hmm.
we need to look at it in that context. Personally, I mean,
Yep.
and again, not at all diminishing what he's done because I think he's been been fantastic. I
Yep.
don't think Philly would have expected anything more from him. Like if you told Paul Day this is what you'd get if you draft him, if first overall this is what you get the first year, they'd be like, "Holy cow, really?" We expected him to take longer. So
Hmm.
I think it's great. And will he be in my top five? Absolutely, no
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, one of the things we wanted to talk about, about in regards to this award is that it really does feel like this is going to be one of the most spread out votes in quite some time, which I think
Yes.
is going to be very intriguing.
Hmm.
And it's interesting, I know that last year the NLL decided to not show the point tallies in terms of votes for all of the awards, but they have in the past. This would be a situation where I'd be very interested to see the point tallies for the rookies, because I think that if you look at who's going to end up winning that award, that number of points for votes is going to be much lower than maybe some of the other awards.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's going to be spread right now. Again, with the MVP, unless somebody really takes off over
Yep.
this last stretch, I mean, who knows? But
Right. And then also you have transition player of the year, which is, what are we calling a transition player? I know that's been a
yeah,
discussion we've had on this program. And so that throws a whole wrench into that conversation.
it does. I mean, how do you determine? I mean, is is Ian McKay a transition player?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that
I mean,
you're agreeing that's the question? Or you're saying he is because I don't know.
I'm agreeing it's a
Yeah,
question, because
yeah,
he has been playing a lot out the front door,
yeah.
especially with the injuries that team has had. So it'll be interesting. Although he is moving back into the position
Mm,
more so now that they've got Ron John and Kyle Matisse there and also I believe they're sorting things out at the moment, so it'll be
yeah,
interesting to see what happens. But yeah, it does complicate it. You could say the same thing about Zach Courier.
100%.
What do we what do we do with him?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
yeah. And I mean, that's another award that there's no clear leader. I don't think. I'm probably still on Jake Boudreau,
Yeah,
but I could see Owen Grant for sure. I think Matt Gilray needs to be considered for that.
yeah,
People are going
yeah,
to talk about Ryan Tarafenko. I'd like to personally see a bit more on the defensive side for my transition player of the year. But I mean, Tarafenko's been just on a rampage for
yep.
Halifax.
Yep. Yeah. I
So,
mean, those Halifax guys, I mean, really all of those individually, some of those guys have had not only huge games, but huge seasons. And it's been great to see after a slower start, a guy like Jake Withers,
yeah,
really come to life in the second half, exactly what this team needs.
yeah. And so I don't know. That one's wide open too. There's a lot. You know what? I'm looking at Tarafenko. He's got 15 goals, 14 assists. Fantastic for a transition player.
Yeah.
He's also got 11 caused turnovers and 91 loose balls. It's not like
Hmm.
he's way off the mark. And I'm not trying to say he's a bad defender. I'm saying I think some of the other guys have a bit more defensively. So, yeah, he's got to be in there in the
Yeah.
discussion too. Like it's so hard. So,
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. I mean, we are actually, I don't think there are any games on April 20th. So we are exactly now a month away from the end of the regular season, and so much still to be decided on so many fronts.
yeah. How about Matt Hossack for transition? I think defensive player of the year. Probably the leading candidate. 29 caused turnovers, 4 goals, 11 assists for 15 points. That's pretty interesting. I mean, I don't know that he won't be my vote. He
Hmm.
won't even be my vote for the team. But boy, he could be in the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, he's been phenomenal. I know we've talked about Hasek as, a defensive player of the year,
Hmm.
and he's been very solid. I mean, that game against Halifax now doesn't help
Yeah,
any case for defensive player of
no,
the year. So hopefully that doesn't continue to happen the rest of the way. But
yeah.
but yeah, he's been phenomenal.
I say
Um,
give everybody a one-off.
yeah,
You can
yeah,
have
that's
one
fair.
game where it's just nothing's happening.
Yeah, and I know that he won't be in the conversation, but I feel like we do need to just be shouting out, as a defender, Paul Dawson, who is now holds the all-time record and is still with 6 games left for the Buffalo Bandits. He's already got 32 block shots this season, so 35 block shots this season,
Yeah, but
which
he's
is
a part goalie. I
yeah,
mean, he was drafted as a goalie, but he also
yep,
honestly he plays net, right? He
yeah,
stands
no,
in the crease and block and stuff like I don't know.
I mean, it's a great and effective strategy, and I
Yeah,
know that people were questioning it during the finals over the last couple years about what people's thoughts were about it and how Buffalo is going to explain it, and I know that Coach Tavares is like, well, it's a strategy and it
mm.
works, and it's not too uncommon in his opinion. So,
He will have to
uh,
answer to the lacrosse gods for playing that way. I
well, I mean, look, if it works, it works, and it's not breaking the rules. I can't
yeah
knock it. So.
yeah. Also, Nick Weiss for transition player. Throw him in another 17 points this year,
Yeah.
20 caused turnovers. Overlooked guy, but they love him and other teams hate him, which is a very good sign for a defensive player.
Yeah.
That's going to be it for the awards section. We're going to move on to our predictions, and we'll be back with that in just a moment here on Inside the World of Box Lacrosse. For Adam Levy, Greg Beecher, Charity Beecher, I'm Steven Stamp. Thanks for being with us in whatever this turns out to be with the tech issues we've had today, or the interweb issues that we've had. But we'll be back in just a minute with our third and final section. Welcome back, lacrosse friends, to Inside the World of Box Lacrosse. Here we go with Humiliate the Hosts, although it was not humiliating last week. I went 5-2, Adam went 4-3. We did okay in our picks last week.
Yeah, it was. It's always nice to have a good week.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't had a great season. And you know what? You talked about how it's funny because you brought it up that we tend to overthink what we're doing. Or maybe it was me. I honestly don't remember who says what half the time amongst the two of us. But you know, and it's true. Like, we do overthink it. And I tried last week not to overthink it, and I think it helped. So we're going to start with Ottawa and Halifax. And I'm just going to say Halifax is playing great. Ottawa is not. I'm going to go with the Thunderbirds.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Thunderbirds as well. I mean, after that performance against Saskatchewan, how can you not pick that team? So I think we're both going Halifax there, but I will also add a bonus part of humiliate the host here for me. I had texted Pat Gregoire, who was on the call for the Saskatchewan Halifax game. This was the return of Austin Shanks to Halifax for the first time since the trade, and it's very interesting to see him back, and with the thrashing that Halifax gave to Shanks and the Rush. I had texted Pat that if I was a broadcaster in that moment, I would have said Shanks for nothing, Austin. So as a broadcaster, I'm sure you're rolling your eyes. I can't see your face right now.
I kind of liked it, but I also think you took 45 seconds to get to that.
Yeah.
Come on, man. Oh, okay. Vegas at Buffalo. Do you have any pithy sayings about Vegas at Buffalo, or should we both just say who we're going to take on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. Buffalo.
Buffalo. Yeah. There we go. That was really in sync.
Yeah, that was pretty good, eh?
Yeah.
I jumped it a little bit, but yeah. Oh, see, you want to add more. I was just going to move. Go ahead.
I was going to say one thing to look at this game. It is notable. The Tucker Out Lymphoma Cup is this weekend, and whoever wins this Vegas Desert Dogs Buffalo Bandits game on Friday will be the winner of the inaugural Tucker Out Lymphoma Cup. So playing for a little more than just a win in this game.
So with Vegas only having 3 wins on the season, they must have just lit it up in the Tucker Out Lymphoma Cup.
So they've only had a couple of games each, and so what I was talking to Evan Schemenauer about this, and because it's the head-to-head games against the 3 clubs with Albany, Las Vegas, and Buffalo, and because Las Vegas beat Albany, they got the 2 points there, and so you now have Las Vegas with a chance, both Las Vegas and Buffalo with a chance at 4 points, and because of the tie breaks, the tie break would be head-to-head between teams with tied points. It does come down to this game for that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So for 2026, Las Vegas will be pushing to have 18 Tucker Out Lymphoma games, which honestly not a bad thing. I mean, we could do it all the time. He deserves to be remembered. Don't mean to make light of the situation and everything, but let's move on to Philadelphia and Toronto. And boy, that's tough, right? I mean, Toronto traded away a bunch of assets, had a pretty tough outing in Vancouver. Philadelphia is just spiraling, as we said, having trouble scoring. And Troy Holochuk has been pretty good for Toronto in net. So who you got?
Yeah, I mean, Philly needs this one. I'm just gonna keep saying that it's gonna be Philly until it's not, and I'm also gonna say with a little bit of there is some history on the line, Stamper, that Philadelphia has now lost 6 games in a row, which is tied not only their franchise record for longest losing streak with the new Philadelphia Wings, but it was actually also the longest streak from the old Philadelphia Wings from 1987 to 2014. So 7 in a row would be the longest losing streak in Philadelphia Wings history. That is something that I don't think anyone wants to see. And so for that alone, I would just be picking Philadelphia.
Yeah, I keep thinking, at some point Philly's got to win, and I, I mean, I haven't given up on Toronto as playing well, but they are, basically done for the season. It does mean more to Philly, and that often it has more import for Philly.
Yeah.
So that often will make a difference. And I guess against a team that's near the bottom of the standings, you don't want that to be the week that you finally give up on saying Philly's going to win eventually,
Yeah.
and then they go and win it. So yeah, I'll
But
stick with the Wings. But boy, they do need it. They really need it if they want to have a shot at the playoffs.
yeah, and I've got just a quick question for you. I mean,
Yes.
with the offense that they have, I mean, what is the most recent example of an offense of this caliber just underperforming at this level
Oh
week after week?
wow, that is the type of question I would look. I would pour through the pages to check. So that's a good one. We'll have to. That might be my musings next week. Who knows? Um, we'll see. Or the core of it anyway. Yeah, that's a good one. I nothing. I mean, nothing jumps immediately to mind.
Yeah.
Do you have one that you've got lurking?
I I don't. I've been
Yeah,
trying to rack my brain about it, and
yeah,
I've been to a couple of the Philly games recently during this losing streak, and I've
yeah,
been talking to some of the Philly media, and we're all just scratching our heads, being
uh-huh.
like, "What is happening?"
Mm.
I like Mitch Jones and Blaze Reardon and Brendan O'Neill, Sam LeClaire, like all these pieces, and it's just like you're scoring 8, 10, 11 goals in a game.
And that other American dude, Rezateritz,
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, that guy who
right?
also made American history,
Yeah,
becoming the first American-born player to reach 500 assists. So congratulations
yeah,
to Joe on that.
yeah. Um, so, following that game on Saturday, Buffalo coming off what we both think is going to be a win over Vegas at home. They're heading down the interstate to Albany, and I think this is going to be a good game. Um,
Yep.
I think Albany is playing really well. Doug Jamieson is looking pretty solid. He still has some sketchy moments. He lets in, it feels like 2 or 3 goals a game that you're just like, oh, you really should have had that one. And that can be absolutely crushing against Buffalo. Because if you're giving up two or
Mm,
three against most people, you're going to give up 5 or 6 against Buffalo, right? The way they play. So
yep.
I, I'm torn about this one. I feel like Albany really had something to build on off the way they rebounded against Georgia. I just don't know if I can expect them to beat the Bandits, who still have something to play for. They want the NLL Cup to go through Bandit Land.
Yep.
So I'm gonna stick with Buffalo to win, but I don't feel great about it.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you said that because this is going to be the first one where we differ. And
Okay.
I'm going to say Albany. Now, Buffalo has been fantastic
Yeah.
all season long. Really, we've been singing their praises
Mm-hmm.
from week one. But I think that on the back to back, which by the way they had a back to back earlier this year, and they split those games. And when you're going into Albany with that growing crowd, and you've spoken to it about how it's really impressive, that there is a difference when you have 6,000 plus people
Yeah.
in that arena. It feels different, and Buffalo has. Not in the postseason, but in the recent years, they have struggled to beat Albany in Albany and with more crowds and on a back to back with Albany playing the way that they are, I think that there's enough there for me to sway towards Albany. Also, I just like being around crowds that are happy. I've been around too
Right,
many
you're gonna be
crowds,
there, of course.
too many crowds where they go home very unhappy. And I've been asked by a couple of fan bases to not show up because I seem to be bad luck for
Is
those teams.
Philadelphia one now?
Yes, oh,
Okay,
that's
that's good.
Philadelphia has a terrible record when I'm in
Yeah.
attendance. It's really something like 2-13 or something like that. It's
Wow.
not good.
Wow,
Um,
dude.
yeah, yeah, no. I mean, at that point, you could blame me.
Yeah,
But yeah. So for those reasons, I'm going Albany. But Buffalo, with the way that they're spreading that offense out, I mean, it hasn't just been Dean and Josh. You've
yeah.
seen Cloutier, you've seen Kyle Buchanan, who's on pace for a career high 33 goals this season. You've seen Chase Frazier, Ian McKay stepping up. I mean, the amount of weapons that they have is unbelievable.
You've got me on the verge of flopping, but well, the one time I did, it went really badly, and I think it would basically guarantee that Buffalo would win, and I did it wrong anyway, and be
Yep.
kind of double wrong. So I'm going to stick with the Bandits. But
Yep.
the next one, San Diego at Calgary, again, huge for both of these teams. These are two of the teams that are in kind of precarious positions. I mean, you think
Mhm.
of San Diego, they've been playing so well, and they have. They've been playing really well, but they're still in a spot where they have a tough stretch, this tough schedule down the stretch, and they are not as locked in to the playoff race as I think people might think until you
Mhm.
start looking at all the factors.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm gonna go San Diego with this one. I mean, they have looked really good this year. I know they've had some tough losses, some head scratcher moments. Defenses, had a bunch of injuries, and I think that there is a strategy there from GM and head coach Patrick Merrill about trying to get this team healthy for the postseason and doing the best they can with the pieces that they have right now. But I think San Diego is a great team, and I think it's going to be a great game. But I think San Diego wins this one.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, it's interesting. You look at things like down the stretch. We've talked about will Buffalo rest some players at the
Yeah.
end of the season if they've already clinched first place as they're sitting there now because they're basically a game ahead of Saskatchewan because they've got a couple of less losses or a couple
Hmm.
fewer losses, and they beat Saskatchewan, so they've got the tiebreaker. So they could clinch the first place in a few weeks. Will they rest some players? Would San Diego love to do that? Resting guys, given some of the guys that have been banged up, I don't know. I mean, they're not. I don't think they're going to have the opportunity because they'd be even if they've clinched a spot, they'd be hoping to get a game at home,
Yep.
right? And they're not in that position right now. So,
Hmm.
yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, Calgary went out and got Nick Rose. They obviously are bought in. They're in for this season, but oh, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm going to go with the Seals as well because they are playing very well. And when it comes down to it, I think there's probably no more clutch player in the NLL right now than Westberg.
Yep. Oh, he's been
Yeah.
unbelievable. Yeah, his late goals. I mean, he is a true captain through and through.
Yeah.
It's been amazing to see. So yeah, I mean, he's just been awesome. But then you see a huge game from Rob Hellier last week. Yes, it's
Yes.
against the Desert Dogs, but I mean, good on Rob for having that game. That was really impressive. And if he can keep rolling like that, and you got Westberg and those other pieces there, I mean, that's a scary thought.
It is. There's one more game,
We got two more.
two more games, one more game on Saturday, if you'd let me finish. No, I'm kidding. I
Yes.
had definitely wrapped up. Georgia is in Vancouver, and this is interesting because Georgia has been playing really well lately, but they've lost a couple of one-goal games. They're due, right, to win. But
Hmm.
Vancouver has Christian Del Bianco, who was great, is
Hmm.
fired up. They've got that defense in front of them is so good. Things are clicking fairly well up front. Um, the transition game is big. I mean, they've got things going. This is a tough one, and I guess
Yep.
it's my turn to go first, isn't it?
Yep.
Oh, who should I take? I on. Oh, it's tough. Sometimes when you play a bunch of one goal games and you lose them, you come back and have a big effort and it's just like put the game away, right? But
Yep.
sometimes you go the other way and it's you've had all those tight games and all of a sudden you have one that's not quite as sharp and you wind up not being super competitive in the game. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to go, but I feel like Vancouver is kind of the team on the rise, even though they've had some shaky results lately. But that was all pre
Hmm.
CDB era, so I'll take the Warriors this week.
Yep. I'm gonna do the same. Christian Del Bianco is a game changer. He was really impressive and electric in his debut with the team, and I think that that's going to continue. I think the questions are about the offense and how they're going to contribute. Who else is going to step up outside of Keegan Ball and Adam Charlambides, which, that has been a storyline that nobody's really been talking
Yeah.
about. Ryan Martell had a great year last year, and he has just dropped off, in terms of his totals. Riley Lowen also lower on his totals. So getting that support on offense is going to be key down the stretch here if they do want to make the postseason. You can't just rely on two guys offensively, and you can't just rely on your goaltender to save you every single time.
That's a good point. But I guess we're both doing it this week.
Yeah, we are. We're riding the high until we get
Yeah.
bit by our picks.
Speaking of riding the high, I mean, Colorado, you just keep thinking they can't just keep doing this, winning these games. Like they're losing guys, and
Yeah.
they just find ways to win, and they're such they did that, when they went to the finals 2 years in a row and won one. And a team, as long as they have Ryan Lee, I think they're going to be okay scoring some goals. Honestly, he's so creative, so dynamic,
Yeah.
and the defense. Dylan Ward, when he gets going, we know he's as good as anybody in net, and they have that defense led by the likes of Robert Hope, Jordan Gillis,
Hmm.
and one of the most overlooked guys in the game, Warren Jeffrey, who honestly his numbers aren't quite there with some of the other guys, but it might be a factor of how cost turnovers are rewarded around the league because
Hmm.
it can be very different from barn to
Yep.
barn.
Yep. Yep.
But I can't pick against Colorado right now.
Yeah, and then also you throw in TJ Comizio, who I believe in
Right.
the locker room won their kind of internal player of the game for his effort in his team debut. I mean, that is a strong defense in front of them, and it is there are just coaches in this league, and they're Hall of Famers for a reason, and they're respected for a reason. Where you got the Coach Malowskis, you got the Pat Coyles, they just know how to rally their guys when they need to step up. And one thing that was a very good point by Connor Robinson when I spoke to him for the Lacrosse Matrix podcast is, this isn't new to them. During that NLL Finals championship run, and in the finals before, they were missing Ryan Lee, they were missing Eli McLaughlin, so they're used to being without key players and having other guys step up. And so that is going to be key down the stretch here without Zed Williams and Eli McLaughlin. But I think Colorado just, it feels good. One thing that and you've spoken to Colorado players, this
Mhm.
year, and I have a ton, and the coaching staff. I mean, they were just so embarrassed and upset with the season they had this year, and
Last
the
year.
the last year.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, and that they are like, we are not going to let that ever happen again.
Yeah.
Like that was one of the lowest points for them. I haven't heard anything other than that from anybody, and that's really fueling them.
Yeah. One of the few good things that did come out of that was getting Will Malcolm as the first pick in the dispersal
Hmm.
draft, which was huge because speaking, I was going to say who can step up for them with McLaughlin and Williams out, but Malcolm already has. I mean, he's been such a great addition, leading the team in goals, tied with Connor Kelly, and I think Malcolm has been. You look at that Lee on the right and Malcolm on the left, and what a combo those two are. They're spectacular.
Yeah, and also I think it's a great opportunity for a guy like Thomas Vella to get a lot of looks
Hmm.
and see how he's going to contribute offensively. Is he that guy that that outside guy who's going to step up and really kind of fill the void there? I just think that things are looking great for Colorado right now. I'm very excited about the rest of their regular season and what that postseason is going to look like.
That is going to do it for us, for Adam Levy and me, Steven Stamp, here on Inside the World of Box Lacrosse. There is plenty for Craig and Jerry to do as they pull everything together once their internet is back up, which it's supposed to be sometime in the next hour or so, I think. They was the word they were getting, and they're going to make all this look like a well-oiled, smoothly recorded show, and make everything look good. And thank you so much. Sorry we couldn't be with you live, but we're pretty excited to get the show out. And also watch for a bonus feature. Greg and I are going to get together later. And I had while I was calling the Georgia Albany game, doing the color commentary, I had a great Twitter question from, I think it was me. See, look at the big brain on Brad, which I love because it's a reference to one of my favorite movies, Pulp Fiction, of course. And he was asking, what's the difference between the two goals? There was a Kyle Jackson goal that was waved off, and on review was, or I think it was a good goal, and then it was waved off after because he was in the crease, and a Dyson Williams goal later in the game that counted as a good goal. And I was saying on the broadcast quite clearly, on the Jackson, I'm like, no, that's no goal. We can move on. Like it's not a goal. And the Williams, I fairly quickly was like, yeah, that's a good goal. It's going to count. And both those did come through. And somebody asked, weren't they kind of the same play? So we're going to go through the details of that in a special little piece of content to make up for not being able to be live this week.
Well, that is very cool. That is a surprise to me. I love when we can surprise the co-host
Right?
to end the show. So that is going to be very cool.
I thought I
And
emailed you about that.
I need to be better sometimes at checking my emails. So there you
Maybe.
go. I've just exposed myself for not checking my emails as much as I should.
Or it's possible that I didn't, that I just sent it to Greg, but I could have sworn it was on the group email. But anyway, that'll do it for this episode of Inside the World of Box Lacrosse. For Adam Levy, I'm Stephen Stamp with Greg and Charity Beecher in the background, making it all happen together. Thanks for being with us, and we will see you next time.